Okay, I welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. This is an audio and video show where we interview a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. On each episode of this show, we interview a guest who has a story to share about how they have acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, we hope to uncover a new understanding of learning as conceptualized, imagined, and narrated by the guest in our show. Through these conversations, when I started this podcast, I wanted to create a kinder and more empathetic version of the internet, where we realize and slowly come to appreciate the time, effort, love, learning, and sacrifice that it takes to build a career in any field. So today I am fortunate to speak to Arjun. So a little bit about Arjun and his journey before we jump into this conversation. So Arjun is a full-time treasury professional. He is a two-time published author and also a freelance sports journalist. His most recent best-selling sports-based fiction novel was called Captain Caduce, and I have a copy of that wonderful book that Arjun gifted me over here. And this book has garnered rave reviews from readers. Arjun is also an avid memer, and I'm curious to talk to him about that too. And guiding and mentoring aspiring authors is a passion of his. Arjun has also written another book called You Raise Me Up that he published in 2016. He loves sports, and that's one of the reasons I'm really excited about this conversation as well. So, Arjun, the first question I wanted to ask you, Arjun, is to share with me some memories from your childhood. Like, were you always a reader? Did you have someone in your house that encouraged you to read? Where did this relationship with books and writing start for you?
I was encouraged to read from a very young age. My grandfather had got the World Book encyclopedias for us, and the children's like there was another one also. I forget the name, but World Book. I'm talking about early 90s. So that was a very massive thing. That time computers were not there, and just having any encyclopedia was a major thing because that was the reference material. So that was how it started. My grandmother was a librarian in the House of Soviet Culture, which is now I think Russian Center of Culture, I think in Mumbai. And yeah, I mean, I was always encouraged to read. I remember when I was in third standard, my first memory of reading probably would be trying to read C. Rajagopalachari's Mahabharata or Ramayana, which I found a little complex for me at that age. But I enjoyed it later when I grew a bit older. When I think I was around 18, I read it again. That was my first thing. But after that, in school, I would read quite a bit, like Enid Blyton's books, Famous Five, Secret Seven, then Hardy Boys also. This I'm talking about like I passed out school in 2005. So in that time, either there were foreign authors, Indian authors weren't that many. I don't know if Chetan Bhagat's first book had come out also at that time. But those were my first that was my first exposure to the field of reading. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's quite interesting, Arjun, because you are a reader,
Yeah.
but you're also a writer,
Yeah.
and you write about stories based in like an Indian context. I know you have this parallel life as a finance
Yes.
professional, so where did that come up? Were you so what did you study in university, and how did you eventually enter this field of becoming a finance professional, and what does your job look like, or the jobs you've taken up over time look like on a day-to-day
So
basis?
it is basically managing money and forex transactions basically, without getting too much into the details of it. It is very detail oriented. One requires to have a very cool mind. It is very important to be very calm while doing the work. If somebody's if I'm not in a good frame of mind, sometimes mistakes can happen. So I did my studies in like I've done BCom and I've done a degree in finance as well. Um, So I've been in this field since I was 18. So it's pretty much yeah, a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, and like for you, Arjun, when did the literary sort of inclination start? Because 2016 was when you published your first book. Like when I read the introduction for that book, I was just curious. Before you wrote that book, did you read a lot of romances? Because it's this story of two characters. Alok,
Yeah.
is it Alok and
Yeah.
Priyanka? So, and I love the entry point where they meet each other on a flight, and there's sort of a triangle. So, but I'm sure, like, there is some model of a romance or a love story feeding your curiosity growing up too. So what was your idea of love growing up, and where did you get your media exposure related to that from?
That book happened very randomly. I don't read that much of romance. Now I've started reading it again because that is one genre which I've not read too much of. Um, but yeah, I mean, I was just sitting one day on the computer and this a random story came in my head and I just started typing it out. I think what happened was I was so enamored by the story, which was unfolding in my mind, that I could not relax without me getting it out. So that was the first time where I actually experienced that desperation for me to get a story out. But I had been writing for quite some time. Like I had been in my school days. In fact, I used to write some articles. I would send them to the school magazine, but they would not get published for some reason. They said that it did not meet the standard. I don't know what they meant by that. I still have a few of those articles with me. I still think that they are very good. But I started writing in my community magazine when I entered college. That was when people started recognizing me in my colony, in my community gatherings, because that magazine is well read from people of my community. That was how it started. And just to give you a bit of a background, I didn't know anything about the field of publishing before I wrote my first book. So everything that I did was just what I thought was right at that time. A lot of it is actually not right when I look back in hindsight. That is why I have this passion or this deep interest in guiding other aspiring authors so that they don't make the same mistakes which I made, at least. Because the mistakes which I made were, like, just to give you an example, like I said, I would write articles on my community magazine. Now, I would just write them and just submit them, and sometimes they would get published with the errors also. My logic was there is an editor who will do the editing. I don't need to do any editing, but the writer has to do the editing themselves. The author has to do a lot of the heavy lifting of the editing. I did not know this while publishing my first book also, which is a very rookie mistake. Any publisher, any book will go through probably 3 rounds of editing and 1 round of proofreading, maybe. That is in itself not totally enough because it requires a lot of constant reading. Like, I corrected that mistake for Captain Caduceus, my second book, where I was editing it every day for 3 months, the entire book. Every other day, I would complete reading it. It became so much that I could not spot any mistakes. So now, if I go through the book, I can spot a few things which I would have done differently, plot wise or language wise, sentence formation wise. That keeps on happening, but it was very. I started from not knowing anything, not having anybody I could go to for advice. So that was something which was a little daunting. When I look back at it, I just wonder what pushed me through all those times. But so now when I have the chance, anybody, if I see anybody's like their book is in the stage of publishing or they're thinking of how to write a book, I always try to take out time and try to tell them, do this, don't do that. That is something which, because they are going to make mistakes. Everybody is going to make mistakes. Just better if you don't make silly mistakes, the ones which I made.
Makes sense, and that's quite kind and considerate of you, Arjun. Because not a lot of people would think in the same way, and I'm curious about the finances and the
Yeah.
logistics for a first time author that's just starting
Hmm.
off on this journey. I have a couple of friends that are interested in, bringing out their own
Yeah.
fiction publications.
Yeah.
And depending on the kind of agents or publishing
Hmm.
houses you work with, I also, was talking to another friend who went down the self-publishing
Yeah.
route. So how do the finances work for someone that wants to bring out a story of their own?
See, mostly to my knowledge, except if a book gets considered for a adaptation, the only income that will get is royalty, and they are not that much really. So if somebody thinks that they're going to make a lot of money by publishing a book, I would say that's not the correct idea because it is not sustainable as their only source of income. Um, it is an expensive hobby. It requires a lot of capital to be infused in it at each stage, at quite a few stages, and the life of an author can be very frustrating because you will get a lot of brickbats, especially from people who you thought were your supporters. You will really know who your real friends are, and you'll be sometimes you'll be surprised how few people really support you. It's a very lonely thing. It's very very lonely. I mean, it is not for the faint of heart, definitely. Whenever I talk to any aspiring author as to like when they want to write the book, I always ask them, how do you deal with failure? Because there is going to be more failure in this life as an author than success. And if you're mature enough to accept that failure and still move on and move ahead, that is something which I would look the biggest quality an author must have is to the ability to face failure and move on, and not his writing and not his or her writing quality. Writing quality is the last thing that can always be improved by editing and all that. But the ability to take hits and get dejected sometimes when somebody says something, then you'll really know whose opinion you should really listen to. These are some things which come along the way, and it is an eye opener. Definitely, it's not being an author is not for everyone.
Yeah, and I feel like that's you've painted like a more
Yeah,
practical, realistic
I don't
portrait
I don't
of it.
want to make anybody get discouraged from writing a book. See, the
Hmm.
happiness, but the object should be very clear. The objective should be that you have a story and you want to give it out into the world. That is it. Everything that comes ahead of that, on top of that, is a bonus. I would look at it. The main thing is self-satisfaction. If you're satisfied by it, then good enough. And also, there are quite a few methods on how to publish a book. You can go through self-publishing, but sometimes that may not have that much credibility because unless you have an editor who's actually edited the book and everything, because some people can also just write a book and upload it themselves, right? So what checks and balances are there? That is the question. You can go through vanity publishers, but their credibility is not really that great. If you don't go through a literary agent, the big publishing houses won't entertain your requests because they don't accept what they call unsolicited submissions. These are things
Hmm.
like if you're not backed by a literary agent, like I'm backed by a literary agent. His name is Sohail Mathur, and he runs a book baker literary agency. His support was instrumental in me getting Captain Khadu's published. Now all these things are there, so you have to decide which way you want to go. Because I always say that you get a first chance only one time, and if you get the
Hmm.
first ball, if you hit for a six, I think it's good. Instead of playing out a maiden over for the first ball and then first over, and then you have to catch up in the second and third over and all that. So it is an ideal situation if things go well first, but many times it does not happen. But there are to do things and not to do things also, which have to be kept in mind.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very helpful, uh, Arjun. Like in terms of the marketing, like once the book is published, I know for most first-time authors, a lot of that heavy lifting has to be done by them too, right? So, how do you recommend someone organize and move ahead with their strategy I've known some of my friends that have bookstagram
Yeah.
accounts. In the modern technology world, they have adopted that
Yeah.
mechanism. But uh, what really works based on your experience as an author?
See, there's no problem in taking help from a professional, but before doing that, I would say that one has to be active on social media, and one should not be hesitant to be out there in the open. Now, that being said, if every post of an aspiring or an published author is about his or her own book, then it will be very irritating for the people who follow their account after some time. Now, one should find a niche. Like for me, I found a niche in memes, and that is
Hmm.
something which I sometimes I make memes and I share them on my social media. So that way, I am active. I don't use my social media as a vehicle to promote my books, which is not. It's sometimes people may find a little irritating. And even though I'm not much of a believer in thinking what other people think, but the support of other people is required if you want your book to do well. So sometimes there are some areas where you have to think what other people are thinking and do accordingly also. In
Hmm.
some instances, not all of the instances. But yeah, I mean, one thing is important. If you are planning to write a book and planning to publish it, find that niche and be active on social media. Gain a few followers through the original route, not by buying them, not by getting bot accounts and all that. Have genuine interactions with other authors, with other people in your circle, in your fraternity, because the best publicity is word of mouth, and that takes a long time to generate. Genuine
Hmm.
word of mouth publicity. I was told this at the launch of my first book. Now, there's one very famous Indian horror author, like author who writes horror. His name is Neil De Silva. He was there for the launch of You Raise Me Up, my first book. Now, he told me the exact things that I'm saying right now. But that time I was like thinking, yeah, what is he saying? Everybody wants to listen to what I want to say, but it's not the case. One has to know the perfect balance of posting about your book and posting about other things. And
Hmm.
what do you use a social media for? I use it for spreading positive content. I'm not somebody who will write depressing content because I use my social media as a means of clearing my head maybe. I use it during my lunch break. I actually don't keep Instagram and Facebook installed on my mobile just to keep my interaction away from that. Otherwise, I'll just keep on scrolling the whole day onward. So, as a method of um, curtailing my usage, I uninstall my Instagram and Facebook app. And when I want to see them, I install them for 5 minutes and then I again uninstall it. So,
Hmm.
that's a good way of keeping my hours that I'm using my mobile also under control. So these things are required, but the main thing is having a social media presence is important because I believe that the publisher will also look at not only your writing but also your social media presence as to how willing you are to put yourself out there. Now, some authors may have this attitude that I've written a book, people will buy it, they'll be interested in reading it. But no, we have to go out there and publicize our book within certain limits. As I said, each and every post about the book is going to just bring the disengagement level to a new high. I mean, nobody's going to read your post after some time. That thing comes with trial and error. That thing comes with making many, many mistakes. And you should be willing to make those mistakes. How many times are you willing to fall to get that success it'll be a test of your character, definitely. That is something which I would definitely say. I mean, writing, as I reiterate, writing is not for the faint of heart. It is a very tough thing. It can make or break you.
Yeah, and but I think there is some real redemption when you get that feedback from readers,
Hmm.
right, Arjun? Because I was reading some of your Goodreads
Yeah.
reviews, of your books, and I was reading some of the thoughts and the opinions of people that have read the book, and um, there were lots of kind comments, where people genuinely enjoyed the story. It gave them some solace and comfort at that point. So, like, beyond the marketing and finance aspects of it, can you tell me some stories where, you have interacted with some readers, on and off, and they've told you or given you some feedback about what they took from your book, and that was sort of, stayed with you in the long run as a writer?
I wish I could say that there have been many interactions, but there actually haven't.
Yeah.
There haven't been so many interactions. I just remember one email which I got from somebody from Uttarakhand, I think, somewhere up north. He had picked up my book at a fest. He read it, he sent me an email, and that was out of the blue. I mean, just felt so good. Very rare thing, but it felt so good. But I'll just say one thing about the reviews and the opinions that others have about your book. The most important thing is what you think about your own book. That is the most important thing. If you think your work is good, then you should find satisfaction in that, and not in the praise which other people may or may not give, because many people may not give praise also. So what you think about your own book should be on the top, everything else is below that. And try not to get too excited or too dejected when somebody says good or bad about you, because I'll tell you one way on how to figure that out. You should be one should be very self-aware. One should know what the strength and weakness of your own work is. Like, because everybody who criticizes doesn't criticize with a good intention. Everybody doesn't have good intentions. Now, the thing is, for Captain Khadus, I can definitely say that the editing was a strong part, because I really worked hard on it. So I don't think there'll be so many editing mistakes. Now, if somebody comes up to me and says that there was a editing was shoddy, this that, then I will probably think that okay, he's just trying to act smart, and people do that a lot. Even though they'll
Yeah.
try to make it sound less obvious, but they do it. It is pretty common. So if somebody gives me that kind of comment, I'll know that okay, he's trying to act smart. But if somebody says,
Mm.
yeah, the storyline, you could have done this, you could have done that. See, because there are two things. One is an objective thing like editing. It can be good or bad. There can't be any disagreement on good editing or bad editing, in my opinion at
Correct.
least. Then on the other
Yeah.
side, you got writing style, story, cover design. All these things are subjective. Some people may like it, some people may not like it. Some people may not like the genre also. Like, you're a
Yeah.
sports fan. I mean, you liked it because you like sports. Everybody
Mm.
does not like sports, and everybody may not have an inclination to read about a sports fiction book. So that these things have to be kept in mind. I mean, as I again reiterate, your opinion about your own work should be on the topmost, and then everything else below that. And again, very, very important, I will stress on this again and again, don't get too carried away or too bogged down by what other people say. If that will happen, then maybe you have to think twice about your career as an author.
Yeah, some very good advice there, Arjun. Like in this book, while I was reading it last evening, I think it's a very interesting time, to read this book because some part of it is based in
Yeah.
2025, and the Indian cricket team has a new captain now, and they're on a tour in England, and there's so many parallels between Suraj Bhatkal's story and the current Indian captain, and it's also like a sort of dystopian world because cricket for some reason is not the main sport, and there are these four other sports. But I wanted to ask you about your relationship with sports,
Yeah.
Arjun. Growing up, what was your connection to sports in a country like India? Like, what sports did you watch and play the most, and why do you think sports brought you joy as a human being?
I used to play cricket in my colony, but I was never good at it. My father was a
Mm.
big cricket fan, so he introduced me to cricket. The first tournament I remember watching of cricket was the 1996 World Cup. I was around 7 years at that time, and my dad had this mission that before the World Cup starts, he wanted to teach me about cricket so that I can watch the World Cup. So that was pretty much there. And to be honest, sports has brought me more sadness than happiness. So being a cricket fan in the 90s and some parts of the 2000 weren't that happy a time for us. So, but you know, sports has always been. I can't explain why it's always been a very important part of my life. Now I'm a little skeptical about it sometimes. I try not to say that I'm not a cricket fan anymore, but definitely my interest in some games has gone down a little bit. Which people have known me for a long time will probably be surprising that I'm not that passionate about cricket as much as I was in the past. Because there have been matches where I've cried also after we lost, like the World Cup final of 2023. I cried after we lost the match, and I called up my best friend and told her, "Oh, you lost," and she's not a cricket fan, so she's like, "So what?" But I'm like, "Yeah, it's a big deal." That to now, it's been a big change, but I just hope this lull is not a long term lull in my passion for sports, at least cricket.
Hmm.
But other sports I also follow. Like I follow boxing, not so much boxing. Sometimes I follow if there's a heavyweight title going on, and I follow who's the main guy and all that. Then hockey I follow. Football I do. I watch India's football matches internationally, even though there is a lot of scope for improvement for us in football. Tennis not that much. Olympics I do follow quite a bit whenever uh, any qualification tournament or anything like that is happening. But yeah, I mean, it's just sports has always been there with me since a young age. So it's a little tough for me to dissociate myself with that. But to an extent, sometimes it has happened a little bit now, a little bit. Yeah.
Like, I relate to that aspect of growing up in the 2000s at least, and playing those matches with that crazy
Yeah,
Australian
yeah,
team that used to win almost every
yes,
game. But I'm because Suraj Bhatkal in this book,
yeah.
Arjun, like he goes through and he's very open about his mental
Yeah.
health. Have you seen other cricketers in recent times come out and speak about some of their struggles, or do you like? I'm thinking about in your mind, who are some cricketers that you think are mentally very strong in the Indian context, for instance, that you have seen growing up and observed over time?
I would think Sachin was very mentally strong, Sachin Tendulkar,
Hmm. Yeah.
because um, for one of the main reasons is he stayed grounded despite all the fame that he had. His contemporary
Hmm.
Vinod Kambli was not that known for his calm nature and his down to earth nature sometimes. So even though Vinod Kambli was said to be more talented than Sachin and he had much more of a fan following than Sachin, which I personally find difficult to believe, but this is what people say who used to watch cricket back in the day, that Vinod Kambli was the number one guy and Sachin was behind somewhere. But Sachin, especially because with billion plus of us watching the match, he did not let the expectations of others overwhelm him, or he did not let the love of so many people see, because Sachin was the quintessential middle class Indian. That's why he was loved by so many people. The other cricketer who I really admire is Ajinkya Rahane. I think Ajinkya Rahane has been one of India's best captains, but he's not spoken about enough. Another person I admire, who I used to not admire in the past, a very long time ago, was Rohit Sharma. I did not like him that much in the past, but I like the way he deals with youngsters. I think he's very empathetic. Um, he knows what to tell a person who's on the sidelines for a long time, because his career was stop and start till he became an opener. He debuted for India in 2007, but his career really took off in 2013. So, to 2007 to 2013, 6 years, he was on the sidelines. That uncertainty, which is something which many cricketers don't know how to face.
Hmm.
That insecurity. He knows what to tell a Sanju Samson who's on the sidelines for an extended period of time and who gets very few chances. He knows maybe somebody else, some other cricketers who's always been the darling of the selectors will not know what to do in that situation because they have never been in that situation. Like if I have to name names, Virat Kohli has always been in the Indian team. He doesn't know what it means to be dropped. Of course, now he's
Hmm.
uh, retired from T20s and tests, but there was never any indication that Virat Kohli would be dropped or he would be on the sidelines because he was always the number one batter in our side. So that is where I would rate Rohit Sharma as a better captain. Even though in Test I would rate Virat as a better captain than Rohit. I think Rohit at times in Tests was not that as good as he could have been. But
Hmm.
yeah, these three cricketers definitely I admire, and I also admire Anil Kumble. Also, he was one of my favorite, probably one of my favorite cricketers of all time.
That's a very strong list of
Yeah,
athletes, and I also feel like the topic that you explored in this book, Arjun, it's a very important topic in the context of today's day and age, because we
one minute,
we don't see
one
the
minute.
yeah.
Oh, you think I'm answering your questions properly? No, I'm not going around and
Yes,
around.
yes. No, this is
It's
perfect,
good. No?
and this is the general flow of the
Ah,
conversation. You're doing, I mean, it's going great,
okay.
Arjun. I'm
Like you
really
don't feel I
liking.
should be more specific or direct, or it's fine, right? I don't mean to.
Not at all, not at all.
I don't mean to beat around the bush or anything.
No, I feel like your answers are quite direct,
Okay,
and
okay,
like you've really addressed all
okay.
the
Because
questions that I've
sometimes
asked, Arjun.
when you ask a question, I sometimes forget what the question is. Also,
That's
you ask
okay, Arjun. No,
something.
I feel like
Ah,
because I feel like sometimes even I do that. I ask multiple
yeah. I
questions rather
sometimes
than
forget what the original
one.
question is.
No worries, and I'll come back to it in case we go
Fine.
down that path. So,
Yeah,
like, what I wanted to ask you, Arjun, was that we don't see the other side of fame,
yeah.
right? Like we see these celebrities getting so much fame,
Mm,
but even the most accomplished celebrities, like a very famous cricket is a big sport.
yeah,
There's a dark side to fame too, where they can't go out on
yeah.
their own. They don't have any privacy. Their life is completely monitored. So there are so many disadvantages. And I remember seeing one of the interviews where they said that their entire life is in hotel
Yeah,
rooms because they can't even go for a walk with their family outside. So there is a sense of normalcy. And it's also the fact that their careers are only 10, 15
yeah.
years. And it's not that all of them will get all the benefits of that 10,
True.
15-year period, right?
Yeah,
It's like before the IPL, you only had like maybe 20 spots
yeah.
available in the entire country of a billion people. So there's a lot of uncertainty, insecurity,
Definitely.
and I think the mental health part of it is so important to navigate because you're expected to perform at peak physical abilities.
Mm-hmm.
But I think physical performance is very correlated to mental abilities and stability.
Yeah,
And you see that in several players. Like I'm looking at an example of a player like Travis Head.
yeah.
Like for the longest time he struggled with his form,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think I read a Cricinfo interview where he said that he stopped thinking about how people will perceive
Yes.
him, how he will be perceived, and he just focused on facing the ball,
Yeah,
and that completely changed his
yeah.
game. To be present physically in that moment. So like was that something you were thinking about, the dark side of fame, as you were writing Suraj Bhatkal's character?
Not as deeply as I'm thinking about it right now, because
Hmm.
now I have a much more deeper understanding of what it means to see. Because these cricketers, they even though they have so many people around them, they're very lonely despite all that, and they don't know
Hmm.
who they can trust because everybody wants a piece of them. They don't know whether this person has good intentions or not good intentions. So they can make mistakes also. They can fall into the trap by some other people. They'll make mistakes. But here is something which I think about it right now. Who can they really go to when they need help? Like,
Hmm.
how do you know that the guy who's acting friendly with us is your real friend or not? And like one day when they just like last year only this happened with Hardik Pandya. when he was made the captain of Mumbai Indians, there was so much vitriol against him, and I'm guilty of being one of the people who booed him from my television, from my home, because I didn't think that making him captain seemed right at that time. Now,
Hmm.
when 30,000 people in Wankhede, the home stadium of Mumbai Indians, are booing him, I mean, what will that do for a person? It can be very
Yeah.
debilitating, right? And plus, we got to know later that he's going through a separation in his marriage and everything. So that was there. Plus, then we win the World Cup after a couple of weeks. Then in Wankhede, the same crowd gives them loud cheers. I mean, if you listen to either of them, there is nothing subtle about anything. You're getting my point, right? I mean, if he had
Yeah.
succumbed to the criticism or succumb to the praise, if you depend on outside, that's why I think what you said about Travis Head was very correct. I had not read that interview, but it sounds very accurate. What he's saying is that his job is to just face the ball and not think what other people are thinking, because this is one of the rules which I live my life by. It's not easy to apply, but I'll share what it is. There are things which are in our control and things which are not in our control. We have to do focus on what is in our control, and try as much as possible not to think about things which are not in our control, because no matter how much we do, those things won't change, like what other people say, their behavior, and the opinion of other people. You can't change that. You can't change. And these things, once you realize it, what is actually in our control, life becomes a little more manageable and a little more easier. So life never becomes really easy, but a bit more manageable maybe. I think one more thing which, sorry, I'm going out on a tangent, but
No.
for me, arguing with someone is the worst waste of my time, in my opinion. If somebody thinks XYZ thing about me or whatever, I mean, there is no point in me saying anything, because nowadays we live in such an opinionated day and age. People make up opinions, and then it's not easy to, they don't change their opinion. Even if they change it, they'll never acknowledge it. So trying to convince other people, trying to argue with people, these are two things which are as good as pretty much given up, except if I think that it is something worth fighting for. If it is worth fighting for, then I will go that extra mile and do what I need to do. But for small trivial things, I mean, getting into arguments, getting into fights, I mean, the amount of energy that we save by not arguing with anybody on a daily basis is phenomenal. Trust me on this. It is
Yeah.
very tough to do, because we like to have people agree with us. Even I do.
Hmm.
Even though I don't get it too much, I like when people agree with me. I like it when people are nice with me, they say good things, but it doesn't happen that often. Now, if I'm going to sit down
Hmm.
and fight with every person who says something ulta sida with me, then nothing is going to happen. I will lose track of
Yeah.
my own work, which is the most important. So, sorry, I was going out on a tangent, but this is also important in the life of an author, because a lot of people are going to say a lot of things. If you are going to sit down and get happy or dejected at every criticism and praise or criticism or whatever, then that's the end of us. Trust me. You don't want to be on a yo-yo machine the whole day. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really difficult.
Yeah, and that I wanted to ask you about the design of this
Yeah,
book,
sure.
Arjun. Like, how do you, what is the thought process behind the creatives of the book? Like this
Yeah,
cover, the font used, the text on the
yeah.
top. So, like, what is the thought process behind that?
So the cover was designed by my literary agent, Sohail Mathura, Bookbreaker Literary Agency. He had designed the book cover for that. The title, the way Khadus was written, was an idea from the publisher also. And the title, Captain Khadus, was from a friend of mine, Adishri, who's a massive cricket fan.
Hmm.
So I thought of the name Captain Grumpy for quite some time. But then Captain Grumpy did not sound that good. And because Mumbai cricketers have a nickname, cricketers are called Khadus cricketers.
Yeah.
So I wanted that Khadus to be there somewhere. So that's how the thing Captain Khadus came, with the help of my friend Adishri. So
Hmm.
that's how it came about. And the title of the book is very important. It
Yeah.
is it it when the book came out in 2019, December 2019. Everybody was asking, is it about Virat Kohli? Is it about Virat Kohli? But it's not about Virat Kohli. It's a fictional story.
Yeah.
So there should be, the title should be there, which brings interest in people also. It should be unique. It
Hmm.
should definitely stand out.
Yeah, and then I feel it does, like if I was in a crowd, I would be looking at this book, and as a cricket fan, I think
Yeah,
that's the immediate sort of entry
yeah,
point. And and I feel like it's good that we're getting, a story in the Indian
yeah.
context. Like sometimes, do you think about that, Arjun, the fact that you're writing in English in a country where very few people speak that language? And like when you were writing, like was some of these thoughts also going through your mind, or you always knew English was the language you will write in? And because I know there are a lot of people that speak English in our
Yeah,
country, maybe more than entire countries around the
yeah,
world, so there is an
yeah.
audience. But is that tension somewhere there
No, no, no.
sometimes as a writer?
I have to work to my strengths. I mean, unfortunately, I know English better than my own mother tongue many a times. So, which is not something I'm proud of. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, English is the language in which I'm most comfortable with, even more than my mother tongue, unfortunately. But it
Hmm.
is a language in which I think also. I think in English. So, I never thought as to whether I should write in any other language. I mean, I have to work it to my strengths. If I start writing
Makes
in
sense.
Marathi or something, even though my spoken Marathi is good, literary Marathi is very different from what we Mumbaikars speak in Maharashtra and we Mumbaikars speak at least. So,
Yeah,
and I won't be the best person to write in a language other than English. So I have to work to my strengths in some cases at least.
that's fair. That makes a lot of sense. As a reader,
Yeah,
Arjun, like has reading fiction
yeah.
or non-fiction helped you process like different difficult phases in your life? For me personally, I have found that
Mhm.
comfort and solace. When I was going through, my own
Yeah.
struggles, I used to find stories were very like sort of
Yes.
therapeutic, because it's almost like you're sitting with a friend that is sometimes, in when you go through certain things, it's hard to talk about it in
Mhm.
that moment, right? You just need someone to be with you and sit with you, rather than try and always talk about it. And I think it's different for
Yeah.
different people. But have you found like comfort in stories in that sense?
One book I can say definitely helped me was The World's Happiest Man or The Happiest Man on Earth, something like that. I forget the
Hmm.
actual title of the book. It is about a Holocaust survivor who, after the Holocaust, he moved to Australia. So I
Hmm.
was reading that book just March or April this year, and I was going through a bit of a tough time. Um, that book gave me a lot of perspective and a lot of clarity. And for me, what helps me to have mental clarity is journaling. Actually, journaling really helps me. I think before I started journaling on a regular basis, I used to wonder what differences is it going to make if I just write down my thoughts. But trust me, it makes a massive difference. Journaling and a few other things like visualization, intention setting, remembering past victories, gratitude, victories for the day. These have been the things which have kept me going when 2024 could have been the worst year of my life, but it turned out to be the year in which I was very incredibly proud of myself. So, um, so I mean, all these things have to be there. We have to work on ourselves. We have to. Thinking is not a random thing that we do. It should be a very focused and very deliberate act. Thinking,
Yeah.
thinking should not be, I got angry, so I will do this. No, you have to think, okay, I'm getting angry. What should I do now? Should I act on it or should I keep quiet? Because every action has ripple effects.
Hmm.
So when people say be mindful, this is what I think about. That when I can either choose to have a confrontation with a person who's purposely trying to irritate me, if I
Yeah.
do that, I'm going to waste not only my time then, I'll waste my time then. That person will enjoy it, that I'm biting the, biting that, whatever you do when while fishing,
Yeah,
like you
like
like
the
taking the
bait.
bait. Then
Yeah.
when I go home also, or when like in any other setting, I will be obsessing about that thought all over again, and my work will not be done. That when
True.
people say be mindful, which is used very loosely, I would say this is what mindfulness means to me.
Hmm. Yeah,
Choosing
because
not to
I,
have
I,
a no, not to have a confrontation, choosing not to have a, it's not a sign of weakness. I mean, I don't think so. So yeah, these things.
yeah, and I think you decide to choose your
Yeah,
battles, right?
definitely.
I don't think you have to satisfy everyone, and I think you're responsible to your close inner circle. And I think I was actually highlighted this small passage, in your author's
Yeah,
note where you said that for someone, it's recommended that a person with a history of with depression should have a regular daily
yeah,
routine which he or she sticks to religiously, as this leads them to look forward to something. I thought that was a very important
yeah,
point, Arjun, because and I feel like um, I think that sort of structure and ritual really helps
yeah.
you get through difficult times, and we don't realize it. And so I really enjoyed reading the author's note before this, and I think you put a lot of thought into it. It does seem like it's come from a lot of personal
Yeah.
reflection, and like for someone that's a friend, for someone that's struggling through, what are some things that you have seen people do for, or based on your experience, what can a good friend do to support someone that's struggling with like a mental health illness?
I think the first thing is not to judge. First and foremost is not to judge and try to put them down.
Yeah.
See, depression especially is not something which somebody can just snap out of, just like that. It's a very complex thing.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes it can be done quickly. Sometimes it takes its time, and but self-awareness is very important. One has
Yeah.
to. That is why I said thinking is a very conscious act. Like when I feel myself going down certain paths in my mind, I know, okay, intervention is required for myself, and not by
Hmm.
anybody else, by myself. Intervention is required by myself. So we have to know what we are spending time thinking about. Is it really worth our effort? What kind of thoughts are going through our head? Are we engaging with those thoughts? These are
Yeah.
they may sound like easy things, but they're not easy to do. They're very difficult to do. And it requires a
Yeah.
lot of self awareness to understand that just because you are getting angry doesn't mean that you should act on that anger. It is a
Hmm.
very, the choice is still with us as to whether we want to act on that anger or not, which is something which is a very subtle thing. And I wish I was taught how to think growing up. I think this is something which I was never taught how to think, how to deal with emotions while growing up. So all
Hmm.
this growth that I've had has been by trial and error. Of course, I've had a few people along the way who have helped me with it. Um, but these routines, like I mentioned, visualization, intention setting, remembering past victories is extremely important because there will be times when we feel overwhelmed. It's important for us to remind ourselves that what, in the past we had a much tougher situation, but we overcame that. Because we can't go
Yep.
around waiting for people to pat us on the back. Sometimes we have to pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah. And I feel like in cities, like in large cities especially,
Hmm.
it seems like there are lots of people, but there's a huge sense of
There
loneliness,
is, there is.
depending on how much of a community. And I don't think everyone has that extended support network and system, because many people, even in big metros in India, come and they leave their
Yeah.
families behind, and they're starting new lives here as young professionals. So I think, you know, just because someone is doing well professionally, it doesn't mean that everything is good.
Oh, of course.
Like people can struggle in their personal life, professional life, and I think the hard part about some things like this is that it's not seen physically, right? So it's hard to completely understand the gravity of it. But
I think
Arjun, for the
I
last,
think everybody's struggling with something or the other. I
yeah,
don't think anybody is there in this world, if they really dare to admit it, Everybody's struggling with some. There is always a pain point in everybody's life. It depends on whether you let it engulf your life or not.
I agree. Yeah. And like for the last question, Arjun, I feel like I can talk to you, for a long time, and I feel like I am really enjoying this conversation. For the listeners tuning in, I will be linking the purchase link for both of Arjun's books. I'm in the middle of Captain Caduce, and I'm really enjoying it as a cricket fan, but also as someone that's a passionate advocate for talking about, your mental health in a very open, honest, vulnerable way, and to get the support you need. So I think this book really deals with a lot of those themes, and I love that it's based in an Indian context. It's also based in Mumbai, so as a Mumbaiker, I love that element too, and it has cricket, which I love, so it checks a lot of tick boxes for me. But for the last question, Arjun, can you give us some recommendations, like for other readers that want to find authors in an Indian context,
Hmm.
fiction authors? So maybe one or two recommendations and why you like that writing so much?
Um, there's one book. It's written by Kainaz Jassawala. It's Who Will Marry Kai Juswala. So it's basically autobiographical kind of. It's a very funny book, and I highly recommend it. It's a fun read, but it's deep
Mm,
also. It's not superficial. It's a deep book also. There is another author called Anirban Bhattacharya, who's also a dear friend of mine. He writes crime. He writes on crime. Um, One of his books, the Chelambara Money Heist, I think it's called. That book should be studied as to how writing should be done, especially non-fiction. So these two people are my good friends, and these I'd recommend their books definitely. And other than that, I would still say that Indian authors are good. One should give Indian authors a chance, and Indian authors put a lot of effort in our books. Please buy books of more Indian authors than support. Yeah, I mean, read foreign authors also. Also, they're also good. I'm not discounting that, but be Indian, buy Indian.
And I feel like that's very
Yeah,
important, right? A lot of independent authors don't get the kind of support that big
yeah,
publishing houses can sort of support. And I feel like when people write stories about cities that you live in, about characters that go through situations in life, I feel like it's important to support them. And I truly believe that it's like a meal you eat outside, right? But it's years and years of effort on the author's part to bring that book to life. So on that note, we come to an end of this episode of Learning Stories. I will be linking, adding show notes to the books that Arjun has written, but also his profiles on social media. As he mentioned, he's always happy to support and, give any advice to new and upcoming authors. But if you are interested in an amazing story and you love cricket and sports, I'd recommend Captain Caduce. And if you are looking for a light-hearted romance, based in the Indian context, I would recommend You Raise Me Up that he has also published. So um, one of the reasons I created this podcast was to create like a kinder and more empathetic version of the internet, and as I said at the start, I wanted to create a space where we appreciate the time, effort, sacrifice, love, and learning that someone puts into any career. And Arjun has, managed to become an author while practicing a full-time career as a finance professional. So I think in that respect, it's just commendable what he's been able to do at his age. And I'm very inspired by your journey, Arjun. Thank you for doing this today. And for the listeners tuning in, stay tuned for more such episodes. And until next time, keep learning.